Have you ever walked into a room and felt the tension in the air? The stiffness in someone's smile? The cold flicker in their eyes before you even said a single word? As if your mere presence stirred something uncomfortable inside them? It's not always about what you said or did. Sometimes, it's simply who you are, or rather, who they think you are. Not all hatred is loud. In fact, the most dangerous kind is silent, disguised behind polite words, forced smiles, or a growing distance that no one ever talks about. You haven't changed, but suddenly, the air feels heavier. Why? Today, we're diving deep into the hidden roots of quiet resentment, the kind that builds up silently and strikes without warning. And what you'll discover might change the way you view others and yourself. These insights, deeply grounded in Stoic philosophy, are not meant to make you paranoid but aware. Because once you see the signs, you can choose how to respond. With strength, not insecurity. Let's start with the first and perhaps most venomous reason. 1. Envy and jealousy. Among all the quiet reasons people may secretly hate you, envy is perhaps the most corrosive. It doesn't shout, it simmers, often masked with indifference or fake encouragement. It eats away at the connection like rust on iron. It usually begins with admiration. They liked your drive. They respected your clarity. Maybe even praised your success. But somewhere along the way, that admiration soured because your success became a mirror. And in that mirror, they saw what they lacked. Your discipline, your ambition, your ability to stand firm while they waver. That's what eats at them. Instead of feeling inspired, they feel exposed, and instead of rising with you, they would rather see you fall. So they don't attack directly. They gossip. They downplay your wins. They question your motives, and slowly, they try to dim your light, not because you wronged them, but because your light shines too bright next to their shadow. This is the quiet violence of envy. It takes their inner dissatisfaction and redirects it outward. And the worst part, it's rarely acknowledged. It creeps into your conversations, into your friendships, turning once warm moments into cold confusion. If you're not mindful, you'll start questioning yourself. What did I do wrong? Why does this feel off? Here's where Stoic philosophy becomes your anchor. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Their envy is not your responsibility. Their jealousy is not your burden to fix. You are not the problem, you're the mirror. You don't need to shrink to fit into someone else's comfort zone. You don't need to apologize for being the person you've worked so hard to become. But do stay humble. Do stay grounded. And above all, never let someone's unspoken resentment make you question your worth. And so, we left off with this truth. Envy isn't always loud, but its effects are deeply felt. It reflects more about another person's inner conflict than anything you've done. But envy isn't the only silent force that breeds resentment. To misunderstandings and ineffective communicationism, it's not jealousy, pride, or betrayal that causes someone to quietly turn against you. It's something far more subtle. Something that sneaks in unnoticed until the relationship feels colder than you remember. It's misunderstanding. Many of the quiet tensions that build between people don't begin with cruelty or malice. They begin with misalignment. One person's intention quietly collides with another's interpretation, and from that small spark, an ember of resentment begins to smolder. At the heart of these fractures is not a lack of words, but a lack of understanding. Not just speaking, but being understood. And that difference can mean everything. Maybe you said something out of concern, but it was heard as criticism. Maybe you stayed quiet during a conversation, and they assumed you were distant, uninterested, or even arrogant. A single word out of place, a silence held too long, a facial expression misread. Can such small moments really change the course of a relationship? They can, and they often do. In Stoic philosophy, perception is everything. It's not what happens, it's how it's interpreted. As Marcus Aurelius wisely put it, everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. But most people don't pause to question what they believe. Instead, they build stories, narratives that solidify over time. A moment of misreading becomes a full chapter of misunderstanding. Suspicion grows. Trust quietly erodes. And here's the twist. They don't react to who you truly are. They respond to the version of you they've created in their mind. A version shaped by confusion, assumptions, and silence. It's tragic because it's preventable. Misunderstandings rarely explode. They whisper, an unanswered text, a comment that lands wrong, a smile that didn't reach your eyes. And suddenly, you're cast as the villain in someone else's story. He doesn't care. She's changed. They think they're better than me. These aren't truths. They're scripts written from uncertainty and lack of clarity. But once written, they're hard to erase. Why? Because the human mind clings to coherence. It wants a story that feels consistent even if it's wrong. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Once someone believes that version of you, their pain is real. Their resentment feels justified. Their story, though false, becomes their truth. That's the danger of ineffective communication. It doesn't just create confusion, it creates false realities. And those realities can quietly turn people against you. But when misunderstanding is left unspoken, it creates division. As Stoics, we are called not just to master our own emotions, but to cultivate precision in thought and clarity in expression. That means speaking with intention, listening with presence, and remembering always. What we meant and what they heard are not always the same. This is why open, honest, and transparent dialogue isn't just helpful, it's essential. It preserves trust, it prevents confusion, and it bridges the gap between intention and impact. When in doubt, clarify. When confused, ask. When you feel misjudged, don't argue to prove a point. Try to understand where the misalignment began. As Seneca reminds us, we suffer more, often in imagination than in reality. And so do they. The person quietly growing cold toward you, they're not responding to reality. They're responding to their perception of you. And as long as that perception goes unchallenged, it becomes the lens through which they see everything. Your words, your silence, your presence. This is why the antidote to resentment isn't always confrontation. Sometimes It's simply the courage to communicate again, to return not with anger, but with curiosity and say, I feel something's changed. Can we talk about it? Of course. Not everyone will meet you in that space of honesty. Some people cling more tightly to the story they've constructed than to the truth you're offering. And when that happens, the Stoic response is acceptance. You can't force understanding where there's pride. You can't rebuild trust with someone who chooses resentment over resolution. But you can walk in peace knowing you didn't fuel the distance through neglect or silence. So someone harbors secret hostility toward you. Don't just ask, what did I do? Ask, what might have been misunderstood? Reflect not with guilt, but with humility. Speak not with excuses, but with clarity. Because most conflicts aren't born of cruelty, they're born of miscommunication. And in a world quick to assume but slow to ask, your effort to understand may be the very thing that turns coldness into connection. 3. Differences in fundamental values and belief systems. The reason someone quietly dislikes you has nothing to do with your actions and everything to do with what you represent. We live in a world shaped by infinite perspectives. Each person is a mosaic of beliefs formed by their culture, childhood, education, wounds, loves, and fears. This beautiful diversity is what makes humanity rich. But it also creates tension, especially when your values challenge someone else's unexamined worldview. The truth is, people are rarely threatened by facts. They're threatened by what those facts suggest about them. Your lifestyle, your priorities, your silence, even your kindness might unintentionally feel like judgment to someone whose life choices differ. To them, your difference isn't neutral, it's provocative. What should be a peaceful contrast becomes a quiet confrontation. What should be coexistence becomes quiet rejection. And suddenly, you're on the receiving end of passive aggression, cold distance, or unexplained hostility, all because your existence made them question theirs. When you choose discipline over indulgence, some won't see it as self-mastery, they'll see it as silent judgment. Your restraint becomes a mirror. Your calm conviction unsettles those whose beliefs were never truly their own. And sometimes, even when you say nothing, your presence alone reflects back to others the very parts of themselves they've worked hard to avoid. In that reflection, people face a choice to grow or to turn away. As Epictetus reminds us, every person is shaped by their upbringing, their past, their wounds, their hopes. This isn't just a philosophical idea, it's a call for compassion. What someone believes isn't always the product of deep thought, it's often the result of repetition, culture, survival, or the simple need to belong. And when that belief is challenged even silently, it can feel like a threat to their identity. That's why people who once seemed kind and reasonable may suddenly become cold, distant, or even quietly hostile. Not because you harmed them, but because you unknowingly became a symbol of something they fear or resist within themselves. So, what do we do with that? From a Stoic lens, we don't argue. We don't push for alignment. Instead, we accept. We remember, disagreement is not always an invitation to debate. And respect. It doesn't require agreement. You don't have to adopt another's worldview. But you also don't need to prove your own as superior. The moment you truly understand that every belief is rooted in something, often pain, loss, or survival, you stop seeing people as enemies and start seeing them as human. Still, that doesn't mean every difference can be bridged. There will be moments, tough ones, where standing firm in your values means standing alone. And when the price of harmony is betraying your own integrity, that's a cost a Stoic refuses to pay. But stand firm with clarity, not contempt. Disagree with dignity. You don't need others to kneel before your truth in order to walk confidently in it. When resentment arises from clashing values, it's often fed by a lack of understanding. Most people don't hate what's different, they hate what they don't understand. And instead of seeking understanding, they judge, they retreat, they shut down. That's where quiet resentment festers in the void, where dialogue could have been, where assumptions replace questions, where silence becomes armor, and where fear drowns out curiosity. So what should you do when your beliefs create invisible enemies? Live them fully, but live them gently. Embody what you stand for, without shouting it. And remember, some will still misunderstand you, no matter how clearly you speak. Why? Because they're not really hearing you, they're hearing through the filter of their own wounds. In those moments, release the need to be understood. Let go of the craving for approval. Anchor yourself in the only validation that truly matters, your own. As Stoics, we know the world won't always reflect our values back to us, and that's not a flaw. It's a gift, because while sameness breeds comfort, difference breeds growth. It stretches our patience, deepens our compassion, and builds the kind of resilience that remains unmoved no matter how loudly the world demands that we change. So if someone hates you for your beliefs, remember, it says more about their insecurity than it ever could about your conviction. Your job is not to change their mind. Your job is to keep walking in integrity. In a world divided by beliefs, choosing tolerance is an act of strength. In a world flooded with noise, choosing to listen is a rare form of leadership. And in a world driven by fear, living your truth without apology is nothing short of a quiet revolution. So let them misunderstand you. Let them wrestle with the discomfort your difference brings. You were never meant to be easily understood. You were meant to be real. And in that authenticity, yes, you will lose people, but you will never lose yourself. For the influence of rumors and gossip, there are few forces more quietly corrosive than gossip. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't confront you, it erodes you. And often, the resentment someone feels toward you has less to do with you and more to do with what they've heard about you. Stories, twisted retellings, entirely false narratives passed around like entertainment until they harden into truth. Rumors spread like slow poison. They seep into conversations, morph with every repetition, and suddenly you find yourself wearing an identity you never chose. You become a character in someone else's drama, often cast as the villain, while people around you begin to judge, step back, or resent you, all without ever asking for your side. That's the real danger of gossip. It doesn't need to be true to be believed. It only needs to feel true. And people are far more likely to believe something that fits into their pre-existing doubts, insecurities, or biases In a world obsessed with speed and sensation, a whisper of scandal is more seductive than a wall of facts. Gossip doesn't survive because it's accurate. It survives because it's interesting. That alone gives it power. And one of the most painful consequences of being targeted by gossip is this. You're no longer defending what you've done. You're defending who people think you are. And that version, the one built on fragments and assumptions, is nearly impossible to fight. You can be sincere, honest, open, and still, some people will have already made up their minds. You're not fighting for truth. You're wading through fog. But this is where the Stoic path becomes your shield. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have: the power to revoke at any moment. You cannot control what others say. You cannot dictate the stories whispered in rooms you'll never enter, but you can control how you respond. And in a world consumed by noise, your quiet, unwavering integrity will always speak louder than any rumor. Let them speculate. Let them talk. Let them build their assumptions. Your task is not to chase every lie or correct every misunderstanding. That's a race with no finish line. Your task is to stay grounded, to live so consistently, so clearly, that over time, your character speaks for itself. The Stoics remind us, reputation is only a shadow. It follows you, but it is not you. The real substance is your virtue, and no rumor, no lie, no whisper in the dark can ever reach that, unless you let it. Yes, it hurts to be misunderstood. Yes, it stings to be judged unfairly. But the deeper wound would be abandoning who you are just to win back approval you never needed in the first place. Those who believed the worst of you without ever asking for the truth were never truly with you to begin with. The more you cling to what others think of you, the more power you give their version of you. But the moment you redirect your focus not on rumors, but on reason, you begin to rise above the noise. So what should you do when you become the subject of gossip? You live with even more clarity. You speak with even more precision. And you carry yourself with even more dignity. Because time, truth, and consistency are the true antidotes to distortion. Lies move fast, but truth moves deep. And while it may take longer to arrive, it always finds its way to the people who actually matter. Seneca said it best: a good character, once established, is not easily overthrown. Those who truly know you, they won't be swayed by whispers, and those who are easily swayed, they never really knew you at all. In the end, by staying loyal to the truth of who you are, you lose nothing real, nothing worth keeping. There will always be those who gossip: the insecure, desperate to feel powerful; the idle, eager to feel relevant. But you don't need to climb down into that pit. Your discipline is your resistance. Your calm is your protest. Your refusal to play their game, that is your power. Let them talk. Your silence, when rooted in integrity, is not weakness, it's a warning. It says, I don't waste energy defending myself against shadows. So stand tall, remain unshaken, and never forget, in the long run, the one who outlasts the gossip is the one who keeps showing up as themselves, day after day, unchanged, unmoved, free. 5. Personal insecurities and projection known of the most quietly damaging forces behind. Secret hatred is something subtle and rarely recognized. Insecurity. It doesn't always look like hostility. Sometimes it hides behind politeness, casual smiles, even applause. But beneath the surface, it simmers, feeding envy, bitterness, and eventually resentment. The most painful part, it's rarely about you. It's about how they feel when they're around you. When someone hasn't dealt with their own fears, failures, or feelings of inadequacy, those unresolved emotions don't just disappear. They look for an outlet, and often, that outlet becomes you, the person who unknowingly represents everything they wish they were, or everything they're afraid they can never be. This isn't always a conscious choice. It's a reflex, a psychological defense mechanism. But that doesn't make it any less damaging. Seneca once wrote, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." That's especially true with insecurity. When someone feels unsure of their success, their appearance, their intelligence, or their social worth, the presence of someone who is grounded, confident, or quietly accomplished can trigger something internal, a silent storm. You become a mirror showing them not who you are, but what they fear they're not. And rather than confront what the mirror reflects, they try to shatter it. It might be a co-worker who starts acting cold as your achievements grow, a friend who begins to downplay your wins with backhanded compliments, a family member who mocks your goals not out of logic, but discomfort. It's not about what you've done. It's about what your existence reminds them of, and what they haven't yet faced. Sometimes, just your presence awakens something in others, their own unlived potential, their unhealed wounds, or their unmet expectations. And when those shadows rise to the surface, the internal storm they feel needs a target. Too often, that target becomes you. This is projection in its rawest, most reflexive form. It's easier to resent your confidence than to admit they've abandoned their own. It's easier to criticize your discipline than confront their own complacency. It's far easier to hate you for reminding them of what they've lost than to face the inner work of reclaiming it. What starts as quiet discomfort slowly hardens into resentment, and left unaddressed, that resentment curdles into hostility, even hate. But Stoic philosophy offers us a grounding truth in these moments. Their projection is not yours to fix. It is not your job to shrink yourself so others don't feel small. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If someone can show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change. But if they simply criticize without clarity, I will hold to my path." You are not here to manage other people's insecurities. You are here to walk your path with integrity, with clarity, and with grace, even if that unsettles those who are still unsure of their own. But here's the deeper gift of Stoic understanding. Recognizing the root of hostility doesn't just protect your peace, it opens the door to compassion. When someone lashes out from a place of insecurity, what they're really revealing is pain. And while that pain does not excuse poor behavior, it does explain it. Seeing this clearly helps you depersonalize the negativity. You stop absorbing it as a judgment of your worth, and start recognizing it as a reflection of their inner battle. Now, Don't mistake this awareness for passivity. Stoicism isn't about accepting disrespect. It's about choosing how to respond with principles, not reactivity. You can protect your peace and remain grounded in understanding. You can set firm boundaries without bitterness. You can extend empathy without abandoning yourself. And sometimes, the most powerful act of self-mastery is this: choosing not to retaliate when misunderstood. Because deep down, you know the attack was never truly about you. This world is full of people carrying silent wounds. And the moment your light touches their shadow, something stirs. Some will be inspired, others will recoil. Your role is not to control their reaction. Your role is to keep shining anyway. Because the more you honor your truth, the more you give others silent permission to face theirs, and those who are ready will. So remember this: the hate born from someone else's insecurity is not a reflection of your character. It's a mirror of their fear. Stand tall, keep walking, and let your presence be the quiet proof that strength and stillness can coexist, even in the face of silent enemies. That is the Stoic way. 6. Lack of empathy and understanding in a world guided by Stoic clarity. We might like to imagine that people lead with empathy, that they seek connection, compassion, and understanding. But reality, raw, unfiltered, and often harsh, shows us something different. Sometimes, the root of someone's hidden resentment or hate toward you isn't about anything you've done. It stems from their inability or unwillingness to empathize. When a person can't step into another's experience, they stop seeing others as fellow humans. Instead, they begin to see them as obstacles, threats, or even enemies. Empathy isn't just about feeling what another person feels. It's the capacity to see, to recognize motivations, to understand context, to look beyond the surface, even when the surface feels smooth. Without that lens, people begin to misread your intentions. They twist your words. They project emotions onto you, emotions that were never yours to carry. A pause becomes arrogance. A boundary becomes rejection. A success becomes an attack. And what may have started as a neutral or even warm interaction quietly turns cold. Not because of what you did, but because they failed to look beyond themselves. This is what a lack of understanding does. It builds invisible walls. People who can't imagine your perspective assume the worst. They don't ask why you did something, they judge it. They don't wonder what you might be going through, they reduce it to a label. And from there, resentment grows, not because you harmed them, but because they lacked the emotional clarity to see you. This isn't just a failure of feeling, it's a failure of perception. Stoicism teaches us that much of our suffering doesn't come from the event itself, but from the meaning we assign to it. And when empathy is missing that meaning, it's often wildly inaccurate. People who lack empathy often see the world in absolutes, good or bad, for me or against me, safe or threatening. Their judgments are swift, sharp, and shallow. And because they never stop to consider the full complexity of others, they misread nuance as danger. A calm tone becomes indifference. A different opinion becomes defiance. This black and white worldview, you create something dangerous. You become the villain in a story you never even agreed to be part of. This emotional rigidity often stems from one thing: self-absorption. People so deeply caught up in their narrative rarely make space for yours. These aren't always clinical narcissists, but narcissistic tendencies are common enough to distort perception. When someone is consumed by their own needs, their own validation, their own worldview, they lose the ability to truly connect dots, and when they can't connect, your emotions become irrelevant. Your struggles become invisible. Your triumphs become irritating, threatening. And in that emotional vacuum, a coldness sets in, one that, to you, feels indistinguishable from hate. But here's where Stoicism cuts through the noise. Not every form of hostility deserves a reaction. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, you always have the option of having no opinion. That includes the judgment of others, especially when it's born from ignorance or emotional blindness. When someone resents you simply because they don't understand you, that's not your burden. It's a mirror of their limited capacity to see clearly. And knowing that gives you power. The power to respond with poise instead of pain. The power to protect your peace. Still, Stoicism doesn't harden the heart. It refines it. Understanding the source of someone's resentment doesn't make you cynical. It makes you compassionate. Because when you realize their coldness comes from their own emotional limitations, not your failings, you stop internalizing the wound. You regain choice. You can offer empathy where it's safe to do so, or you can step back without guilt, without revenge, and without the need to explain yourself to someone determined to misunderstand you. At its core, empathy is a bridge. Some will build it with you, others will tear it down. Before you ever cross a bridge, you must first decide, is it one worth walking? Your role is not to chase acceptance, nor to bend for validation. Your role is to stay centered, to know the difference between what you are and what others refuse to see, and to never compromise your inner clarity just because someone else refuses to open their eyes. This isn't indifference. This is discipline. This is freedom. This is the Stoic way. 7. Competition or rivalry. One of the most underestimated roots of hidden hatred is competition, especially when it silently evolves into something darker. Rivalry, what may begin as mutual growth or a shared pursuit of excellence, can over time become laced with quiet hostility, envy, and a silent wish to see you fall. This isn't the kind of healthy competition that sharpens minds and builds discipline. This is the insidious kind, the one fueled by comparison, insecurity, and unspoken resentment. It shows up in the workplace, in friendships, even within families. At its best, competition pushes us beyond our limits. But when that drive gets tangled with ego, fear, or emotional wounds, it stops being a tool and becomes a weapon. And when that happens, something shifts. The focus moves from, how can I be better, to, how can I make them smaller? And that shift is dangerous. It doesn't always appear as direct attacks. Often, it hides in subtle gestures, a backhanded compliment, an empty smile that never touches the eyes, a quiet withdrawal when things start going well for you. It's the co-worker who congratulates you through gritted teeth. The friend who disappears when your life takes an upward turn. The sibling who competes not from inspiration, but from a need to feel superior. These rivalries don't need to be declared out loud. They work quietly, and that silence makes them even more corrosive. Marcus Aurelius warned us, the craving for recognition and comparison erodes virtue. Because when competition becomes obsession, your judgment falters. Suddenly, your growth no longer matters, only their success does. And their success? It starts to feel like a threat, a personal injustice, a spotlight you think should have been yours. And when that belief is left unchecked, it breeds destruction, defamation, sabotage, deliberate attempts to discredit, not because they harmed you, but because their rise made you feel small. But the Stoic path reminds us, there is no honor in rising by harming others. True strength is not measured by how many you pass, but by how faithfully you follow your principles, even when your path is uphill, even when no one notices, even when applause is given to someone else. Epictetus taught, the only competition worth pursuing is with yourself. To be better today than you were yesterday. Not better than your rival. Not better than your friend. But better than your past self. So if someone secretly resents you because of your achievements, know this, it's not your success that offends them. It's what your success reflects about their self-doubt. In that moment, you become a mirror not of arrogance, but of lack. You become the reminder they didn't ask for. And it stings. But the answer is not to dim your light. The answer is to keep your posture with grace, not pride. With clarity, not apology. There is space for everyone to grow. Another person's success, it is not your loss. It's simply their path unfolding, no more, no less. And once we truly recognize this, something shifts. We no longer compete from a place of bitterness. We begin to admire, without envy, to pursue, without malice, to stand tall, without stepping on anyone else's shoulders. That is the kind of strength Stoicism teaches. Not a strength that crushes, but a strength that masters itself. So if you ever find yourself the target of rivalry, walk on. Let your actions speak louder than their projections. Compete with no one but your former self. And when others try to pull you into their quiet war, offer them something unexpected, your peace. Because real power doesn't need to destroy its rivals. It simply outgrows them, quietly, steadily, unshaken. 8. The influence of social expectations. People don't hate you for who you are, but for who you refuse to become. One of the most subtle, yet powerful, sources of hidden resentment comes from the weight of social expectations, unspoken rules, cultural scripts, invisible pressure. When you choose a path that doesn't align with what's familiar, traditional, or socially acceptable, some people won't respond with curiosity. They'll respond with discomfort, with quiet criticism, or with cold disapproval. Picture a community where conformity is celebrated. Careers follow a predictable script. Relationships obey cultural expectations. Success is measured by boxes. Check, not purpose fulfilled. Now imagine stepping away from that. Maybe you leave a secure job to follow a calling. Maybe your relationships don't mirror tradition. Maybe you speak, think, or live in ways that challenge the norm. In doing so, you become a disruption, not by intention, but by existence. This discomfort isn't always personal. It's structural. When your life challenges someone else's inherited values, they're forced perhaps for the first time to examine the foundation of their own. And if that foundation was built more on tradition than truth, your authenticity feels threatening. You didn't attack them, but your refusal to conform becomes a quiet confrontation. A mirror held up to the parts of them they never questioned. Seneca once said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor." And in the same way, it is not the one who strays from the path who is lost, but the one who never dares to leave it. Yet society often flips that truth. We are taught to fear difference, to resent deviation, to protect norms even at the cost of our individuality. But the Stoic knows peace does not come from fitting in. It comes from aligning with one's values. Your life is your own. You owe no one your conformity, not your family, not your culture, not even those well-meaning voices that say, "We just want what's best." True strength is choosing integrity over approval, meaning over acceptance. And yes, some will resent you for it. Not because you are wrong, but because you remind them of everything they never had the courage to be. So walk your path with quiet confidence. Let others cling to expectations if they must, but never let them chain you to their comfort. You were not born to live someone else's version of your life. You were born to live deeply, freely, and fully, by the wisdom of your own soul. That is Stoic freedom. That is true power. 9. The lack of recognition there is a wound that grows silently. In human relationships, it doesn't bleed from direct conflict. It festers through absence, the absence of recognition. One of the most overlooked but powerful reasons people begin to resent or even hate is the feeling of being unseen. When our efforts, our sacrifices, our growth go unnoticed for too long, something starts to erode within us. And for some, that erosion turns, slowly, quietly, into bitterness, not just at the situation, but at the people who appear more visible, more valued, more celebrated. In competitive environments, workplaces, families, friendships, social circles, the hunger for recognition can run deep. When someone pours themselves into a task, supports others quietly behind the scenes, or shows up with unwavering consistency, yet receives no acknowledgement, they begin to question their worth. They may not say it aloud, but the inner dialogue begins. They don't see me. They don't care. Maybe they only value him or her, but never me. This emotional current, if left unchecked, becomes fertile ground for quiet hostility. As Epicurus once said, the acknowledgement of one's efforts is often more satisfying than the reward itself. And when that acknowledgement never comes, the need doesn't disappear. It mutates into subtle comparisons, quiet envy, or open disdain for those who do get noticed. You may have done nothing wrong, but to someone who feels invisible, your presence becomes a painful reminder of their perceived insignificance. Here lies the Stoic truth. Recognition is subjective. What feels like praise to one may feel like neglect to another. Some crave validation constantly. Others carry silent wounds from years of being overlooked. Understanding this helps you realize their resentment is not about you. It's about what you represent. You symbolize the fulfillment they crave, the applause they never received, the validation they ache for but never learned how to ask for. And this is where communication matters. A kind word, a moment of gratitude, a simple nod of respect. These can change the temperature of a relationship. But if that doesn't happen, if they remain locked in their bitterness, it is not your job to fix them. You are not required to shrink so others can feel tall. You are not responsible for filling someone else's emotional void. Marcus Aurelius said, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them knows anything about the subject." And in the same way, the approval of others means nothing if it comes at the cost of your peace. You must not live seeking endless validation. And you must not feel guilt when others project their unmet needs onto you. That burden was never yours to carry. If someone resents you because they feel unseen, remember, their struggle is not your failure. It's a signal of their own inner disconnection, whether it's born of insecurity, jealousy, poor communication, or years of emotional wounding. It says more about them than it does about you. You're simply the nearest symbol for a pain they've yet to heal. And in moments like this, boundaries are not rejection. They are compassion for both sides. You cannot grow if you're constantly pulled into someone else's emotional storm. So protect your energy. Be kind but clear. Understand but do not absorb. Offer support where it's welcome, but do not sacrifice your peace trying to fix someone who resents the light you carry. In the end, focus on relationships built on truth, on mutual respect, on emotional health. Let go of the need to be liked by everyone, because some will dislike you simply for reminding them of the parts of themselves they've tried to forget. And that's not cruelty. That's reality. So keep showing up with integrity. Keep doing excellent work even when it goes unseen. Recognition may come, or it may not. But a life built on virtue, on stillness, resilience, and self-awareness needs no applause to be valuable. You were not born to be everyone's favorite. You were born to be free. Let that be enough. As we close, remember this. The reasons someone may dislike you often reveal more about them than about you. So walk your path with quiet strength, clarity, and compassion. Honor those who see you clearly, and gently release those who don't. If this message spoke to you, consider subscribing to stay grounded with us on this journey. Share your thoughts below or simply comment in a piece to mark this moment of reflection. And when you're ready, the next video awaits, ready to guide you even deeper into clarity and calm. This is Stoic Capsule, and this is just the beginning. Let's walk forward together,